Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are in a desperate position, and that's been reflected in many serious speeches, too many to list, but that of my honourable friend, the member for Rhondda, was a real highlight, and we support his Amendment J. In her closing remarks yesterday, the Prime Minister said that the House needed to say not what it didn't want, but what it did want. And it's a fair point. But the problem we face is due to her refusal to give us that opportunity at the start of the process. And she herself went to the EU 27, not with clarity on what she wanted, but red lines on what she didn't want. Red lines that boxed her into a corner and produced this damaging deal that fails the country and has been rejected twice by historic margins. And so what's her reaction, Mr. Speaker? Try again. It was my right honourable friend, the member for Holborn and St Pancras, who coined the phrase meaningful vote when seeking to ensure that Parliament had a role in this process. It's a phrase that the Prime Minister has embraced. We had meaningful vote 1, meaningful vote 2. But how, as the right honourable member for Putney pointed out, can meaningful vote 3 be meaningful in any sense of the word? On the 26th of February, the Prime Minister set out the process for this week. Vote on her deal, vote on no deal, then vote on an extension. And she set out the options to be considered at that stage. Her deal, no deal, another deal, or a public vote. Well, Mr. Speaker, this week we have ruled out 2 of those options, so we should now be looking at the other 2 and seeing what consensus can be built. As the honourable member for Eddisbury, my right honourable friend, the member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castle, the member for Bury North and the member for Lewisham East, among others, pointed out. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor was right when he reminded the nation this morning on the radio that the 2016 referendum decision was carried by a narrow margin. A painfully narrow margin, not the overwhelming mandate that some opposite claim. A vote to leave, but not an instruction to rupture our relationship with our closest neighbours and allies. And if there was any doubt, the Prime Minister gave the people a second vote. She called a general election, accusing this House of trying to thwart her plans and seeking a mandate for a hard Brexit. And she lost her majority. She could then have reached out to build a consensus, or she could have, after her deal was defeated in January. But she did not. Yes, she spoke to people across the House, but she didn't listen to what they had to say. She focused on the backstop, which may be an obsession of the party within her party, but is not the primary concern of the majority of the 432 MPs who voted against her deal. Of far more concern to us is the way that deal damages our economy, damages jobs, damages livelihoods, and damages public services. And it doesn't offer the certainty that business needs. The political declaration is deliberately ambiguous, and we know that there are those on her benches who intend to remove her and to rip it up if she gets her deal over the line. Last night, the Prime Minister had another chance to reach out and build consensus, to deliver on the expectations that she had given the House, creating the opportunity to explore all the options and find a way forward. Mr. Speaker, the government's shameful decision to go back on their word and frustrate our democracy with this motion should be rejected by the House. Our Amendment E provides the way forward that this House expected and that this House wanted. And it wouldn't have been necessary, as my right honourable friend, the member for Leeds Central, pointed out, if the government was doing its job. The Prime Minister should also listen to her Chancellor when however much he proclaims support for her deal, he recognises that it's dead and that she should reach out across the House to look at the sort of deal that might be forged around a customs union, single market alignment, and membership of the agencies and partnerships we've built together. And indeed, a further public vote between a credible leave option and remaining in the European Union, a vote which we support. An extension needs clear purpose, a purpose of building the consensus that the Prime Minister has failed to do. An extension that is as short as possible, but as long as necessary. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have seen the folly of fixed deadlines. We warned the House and the Prime Minister that throwing red meat to her Brexit extremists by fixing the 29th of March in law was a mistake, and now she will have to legislate to remove it. And we should also reject her new bullying tactic that failing to back her deal means UK participation in the European elections. It does not, as many members, notably the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe, pointed out. Powerful legal voices have been cited, but let me quote a government minister on this issue. The Advocate General for Scotland, speaking in another place on the 27th of February, said, and I quote, "The noble Lord's point that the European Parliament could sit without the UK having had an election is correct." Mr. Speaker, we must not be deflected by threats. We cannot succumb to the Prime Minister's obstinacy. Her deal has been rejected. No deal has been rejected. We must now seek the extension of Article 50, needed to move on and to consider the remaining options: a different deal or a further public vote.